Okay.
Welcome to the Perfect Your Purpose podcast, where my main goal is to connect with inspiring individuals across the country, allow them to share their journeys that have brought them to where they are today and how they're living and discovering their unique purpose. I am your host, Danica Tramburg, and I'm excited to welcome Dr. Catherine, the author of The Lion and the Narcissist, Amazon's hot new release, which launched on June 1, 2021. And as a clinical nurse, it's not just her education that makes her expert in narcissistic abuse, but her survival of it. Her passion is to help educate those suffering in silence and empower them to stand up and cross over to the other side of suffering. So I would just like to welcome you. I'm so glad you're on today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored.
Of course. And congrats on the book ranking as #1 bestseller new release in personality disorders and #1 bestseller in self-help abuse, which launched on actually World Narcissistic Abuse Day. Awesome. Just congrats on that. That's wonderful.
Oh, I know. It was surreal. It was surreal, but such a blessing. And that it happened on World Narcissistic Abuse Day, which was not planned. It was just awesome. It was amazing.
So why this topic?
You what?
Why this topic?
For me?
Yes.
Well, for me, I wasn't planning on writing a book at all. I was always very big into journaling and writing and researching. Obviously, I worked for a research-driven university, and I always taught my nursing students, like, you have to reflect and journal, and that's how you develop your expertise. So throughout my relationship, I shouldn't say throughout it, towards the end of it, and anybody that's been in a narcissistic relationship will completely understand, when I started to get confused and question things happening in my relationship, especially when my narcissist was questioning my reality, I just started journaling without any intention other than just kind of drawing a picture, like, no, you actually said this a long time ago, and then this is how it makes me feel. And without giving too much of the book away, when my relationship ended, I was thrusted into a criminal court process, which I knew absolutely nothing about, as most victims don't. And I wasn't getting the help that I needed as a victim through victim advocacy. So I just started researching, and every day, writing and researching was helping me do 3 things, which was amazing. It actually was helping me understand what had happened to me within a relationship with a narcissist. It also was a blessing that it helped me navigate the legal process, and ultimately it helped me heal. But this is an amazing story. Part of the consequence that I suffered from staying in a narcissistic relationship was I lost my job, and I was a professor for 20 some years at the top of my field. This is what I had thought was my purpose, and I was just in a very good place career-wise, and I lost that. So I was completely broken, because that's where my identity was coming from, was my career. And of course, there's all those other fears, including finances. I'm a single mom. I don't receive support. And then just knowing I'm not going to have any, yes, you can, any income. So I forgot what I was researching. I received from the police department something called a lethality assessment. And I had no idea what in the world that was. So this is kind of the awesome path that the Lord puts you on. So I Googled this lethality assessment, not knowing what in the world it was, but I'm familiar with assessments as a nurse. So I started researching, and it took me to a website for the state of Wisconsin Criminal Justice Department. And I found that they actually had a program that you could apply for if you were a victim of a violent crime. And they would make an assessment, and you would get approved for certain medical bills to be reimbursed. Well, in the interim, I had filed that application. I had written my book. My book, you would not believe this, I literally wrote in like 6 weeks.
Wow.
Except for it was a blessing that the criminal court process and the Lord leading me held on to publishing it, which made it for a better ending. Although I had to just end it, and I'm starting on my next book. In fact, we're going to make it a series instead of just one book, because I just had to stop. Like, there was so much, and I'm still learning more. But I met with a publisher, and I thought I just like, could you just read my book? My intention was to self-publish.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, if I sell 5 of them, great. I really wrote it for me, and it helped me. So I really didn't think it was going to sell. I just thought, I did all this, I might as well have it bound. And so she read it, and we met for coffee. And she said, not only do I think you should publish it, I want to publish your book.
Wow.
And she had I don't know if people probably don't know that it's very costly to publish a book. And I had just lost my job, and I had serious injuries that I go into detail in my book. But I just left that meeting telling her, well, we'll see. I have to think about it because I have 0 income right now.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, go ahead. And I have to, if it's God's will, I will, okay, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
I got home from that meeting. You're going to love this. I have a picture of it somewhere, but our cameras are not working, so we'll have to do this again. There was a letter in the mail from the state of Wisconsin, from the Attorney General, that I was approved for this program.
Mm-hmm.
And the check, I'm going to get goosebumps, was exactly $5,999, which was the fee down payment for my book. So I knew that the Lord wanted me to move forward and publish my book, and I just went from there. So, so I had no intentions. It was God's will, and it was my purpose, I guess. So
it's really incredible how the Lord leads you in your life in ways that you don't expect.
Right.
And just looking back at your journey, being in that relationship, how is that able to prepare you for what you're doing now?
Well, I know this answer. I'm not sure if I'll articulate it well, but for me, it's been such an amazing journey that I didn't realize the Lord had been preparing me since I was a little girl. And I always knew I was always torn between I wanted to teach and I wanted to be a nurse. Mm-hmm. And then I just was never satisfied. Like, I worked in peds right away and I loved it, but it just was like, you know, like one of those days when you think you're craving something and you go and you get like the biggest hot fudge sundae and you eat it and you're like, that wasn't it. Yeah. It just wasn't it. Didn't and work. Yeah, like that wasn't it. And then tell me when it's done. And then I started teaching and I loved it. And I really thought I found my passion, but the Lord was like, no, that's not it. That's not it. So then I went through the absolute worst time in my life, completely broken. And I was meeting people that couldn't help me. Mm-hmm. I had an amazing team of healthcare professionals and therapists and advocates. And it wasn't per se like they definitely were not bad people or definitely misintended. It was that unless you have experienced this, nobody can understand it. It is a kind of abuse that you cannot explain to people. It's so crazy that people look at you like you're crazy, like that happened to you, or you're so intelligent and so educated, why didn't you get out of it? But it's so convoluted and so complex that people don't understand. So I believe that because I had the training as a nurse, I had the compassion, I had the writing ability, the research ability, and I will be very frank, I always believed in God and Jesus, but not to the extent that I do now. And I think that was the last phase of my journey with the purpose for my life. So God was going to refine that. And although it was my choices, because there was obviously my choice to be with this person, and I made repeated choices to stay with him, even though the red flags were humongous.
Mhm.
The Lord just let it happen and packaged it into this beautiful package. But I had to really dig deep into all the gifts that the Lord had implanted in me, both in my personality, through my education, through my interactions with students and with patients my entire life. So didn't realize that I was already equipped, but it was just this last horrible thing that was going to refine me. Like, isn't there, you get refined through the fire. So the Lord
Right.
put me through the fire and I was refined. So now I look back on it as such a blessing. And I always say, I do not wish what happened to me on anybody, but
Mhm.
the end result, the outcome for me, I would never, ever trade in for the world. And that sounds crazy to some people, but I wouldn't. Like, I've just loved the clarity that I found. I love
Yeah.
finding out how much the Lord loves us, how
Mhm.
much when you think he's not there, he is there holding you in his hand and carrying you. And he's confident. It's us that lack confidence. So I love it. There's not 100 years of education that could have given me this wisdom, and there's no relationship that could have ever given me the fulfillment that I found in this process. So I know a lot of people probably don't want to hear this during their healing journey, but sometimes I'd like to call my narcissist and say, thank you. You actually meant to harm me, but you have actually given me the greatest gift that anybody could give me. So thank
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, it reminds me too of just, God being there for you. And it reminds me of that saying that they say, like God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers, and he'll never, have the situation in your life that you go through that he hasn't given you the proper tools to navigate through. And I think that's so true in so many circumstances, even though it doesn't feel that way sometimes. But I haven't been able to read your book yet, but I definitely want to. This came up so quick, otherwise I would have read it before we did
Yeah.
this. But I wish I would have read a book like this back in college, when I was actually involved in a narcissistic relationship. And being just a very strong female, I always knew what I wanted. I always had super high standards. I never let, well, until this moment, I never let a guy like degrade me or anything. Um, and it's just crazy that such a strong, independent woman can get twisted up in this. And it never in a million years was I that kind of person. And so again, it's so hard to explain, but um, I didn't even realize what was happening to me until I was able to get out of it. But what you're doing now to just bring awareness to this topic is amazing, and I think you're going to help so many people along the way. um, what else are you doing in the public to share this mental health crisis, because that's really what it is.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a public health crisis, and just meeting physicians, therapists, the legal system, just uh, police departments that are just so underinformed. It definitely is a public health crisis. But I'm learning, like we could tell this morning with our little technical glitches, I'm learning like what my next step is. But I
Yeah.
definitely, I have created a course, a 12-week course to help I want to say patients, and I need to learn to stop do that, but that's the nurse in me. I want to help clients. I don't even like using clients. I want to help people. I don't
Right.
like to use victims. I don't like to use patients. I don't like to use clients. I want to help people really heal through this. And I found out, and I don't think it was just me, but for me, I just was always that type of personality. Like, I couldn't make a change unless I understood why. Like, you
Mhm.
need to tell me why, like how little kids will ask their parents, like, but why,
Why?
like I
Yeah.
was not going to do anything unless you explained why. So
Mhm.
that was a huge hindrance in my ability to recover. Like, I would not even call myself fully healed, but my ability to recover was the biggest obstacle was, what in the world happened here? So I find that very important. And I found with my own experience therapy, and I don't know if you experienced this, Danica, but therapy, once you're with a narcissist, I feel like you're always just, it's a new crisis, a new crisis, a new crisis.
Yeah.
So you can never get to healing and recovery because you're always dealing, because narcissistic abuse doesn't stop. So for me, and thank God, I've heard of like a lot of women that are married to the and have to deal with the, share children, and thank the Lord I didn't have to do this, but you're just constantly re-triggered, and they don't let you rest. It's like part of the abuse. So therapy was just keeping me alive, like 45-minute session. And I went to a therapist and I went to a psychiatrist. So my two sessions were not enough. It was constantly like, okay, well, we're going to do EMDR today. And then we did it one day. And by the next week, I was like, oh my God, my narcissist did this now and this. And it was constant just Christ. I feel that definitely coaching is not therapy. And people make that misconception that it's therapy. It's not. Coaching is kind of putting it all together. So for me, I have blended teaching. So I'm very good. I've always been good. My students used to love like story because I could make the most difficult physiological disease explainable. And sometimes it would be a weird cartoon, and sometimes it would be just have these weird ways of explaining things to students. So it's making you understand, and then also helping the person. You have to guide them, because definitely that a victim of abuse, you get stuck in that. I don't want to say, let me think of the right word. You're focused on them, and people will think like that you become, turn that off, obsessed. But it's not that you're obsessed. Oh, she's talking, turn it off. Oh, I lost your voice. Can you hear me still? Can you hear me still?
Sorry, I lost you for a second.
Okay, there you go. I lost you too. But you get very caught up in like wanting to know why they did this to you. Why this? What are they doing? And people that have not been in these relationships think like you're so obsessed with that person. Like you're not obsessed with that person. That is part of the abuse, is they leave you without closure and without anything that makes sense. And you cannot let go of something unless you understand it. Just like a doctor can't cure anything without diagnosing it first. So, and then being in that place, I know too how to discern and sense, okay, well now we need to focus on your narcissist and your abuse right now, but now it's time, like we kind of have to like focus on ourselves, because, and that's hard for people, is to take accountability for themselves. And although I was not a bad person, I am going to be very honest, I made some really stupid mistakes. I should have run, like where a normal or a healthy person or somebody with healthy boundaries would have run. I made excuses. And maybe part of it for some people is conditioning. Maybe some of it is low self-esteem, but that was a mistake. So at some point, your recovery has to change focus away from the narcissist and onto yourself. So I know that coaching entails that. And because I was a nurse and because I taught nursing for so long, I am such big on a detailed assessment, where actually I hope I don't offend any physicians, but I've noticed going to the doctors, they miss this part. And I don't think it's even their fault. I think it's just society is always in a hurry. So they miss things. But I'm very big on assessing and looking at the person as a whole. So I've blended my teaching skills, my experience, and my nursing skills to have a person collaborate with a victim and help them develop a plan of care. Like this is our roadmap on how we're going to go from being a victim here to being a survivor here. And I've been there, so I know you're going to get scared, and I know you're going to be tired, and I know you're going to have a panic attack someday in a grocery store. I've been there. So when that time comes that you need to face a giant, I'm there to help bridge that gap. So I developed a class. What I really was hoping to do just in-person classes, which I have 2 days a week in-person classes here, but I have had such a massive amounts of people asking for an online course that we're going to develop. We're going to move it online. So yeah, coaching, and I want to keep writing. And I forgot, which is really important, I recently signed a contract with a screenwriter producer, and they will be creating a movie inspired by The Lion and the Narcissist, and an 8-episode docu series in which 2 episodes will be using my experience. So we're doing a lot of things, but
that's amazing.
It's a lot.
It is a lot, but it's good stuff.
Yeah.
I think too, just what resonated so much with me when you were talking about, it's just like that constant state of turmoil. And I didn't realize that this relationship I had would affect me so much in the future. But then like the next person I kind of dated, I probably was not great to him because I would double think things. I would not trust him. I was like drawn to this sense of like the relationship should be like this constant, like I got filled up from like a constant like back and forth and like fighting.
Right.
And like that's what I had just learned. Like it kept me like interested for so long. So it's just taken me years really to get over a relationship that I had many years ago. But it's crazy how long term I think these narcissistic relationships can affect someone.
Right. And that's actually what I'm getting ready to put in my second book, because I didn't struggle so much. I probably was I did give my next relationship, who I'm still with, he's a wonderful person, but I gave him a hard time in the beginning. But for me, noticing I'm not the same, and I'm still finding out the changes that have happened to my body. So actually, one problem I have is I don't know if you've been able to describe this, but I just don't feel as smart, or I'll find myself like not knowing sometimes where I am. Like I'll be in the grocery store, I'm like, what am I doing here? Or I'll be driving home and have to ask my kids, like, where are we going? So these little memory issues, and was so concerned, and I really had to scream at the doctor. And I did have changes on my frontal lobe in my brain. I had white matter changes that, interestingly, I met my narcissist in 2014, and they peaked. I had started having horrible migraines. I think in 2 years, there was only like 4 days that I did not have a migraine. And that's when I had my MRI, and there was these white matter changes on my frontal lobe. That abuse does affect the limbic system. So the part of your brain that you associate with emotions. And I've had, anytime he triggers me, I have like the same physical triggers. So I just actually had some more blood work done. And although the basic blood work that most Western physicians look at, like thyroid, B12, B6 are normal, my underlying, doctors sometimes don't think outside of the box. And that's why I think they need to understand trauma, because trauma will affect your pituitary gland and your neurological system. So for instance, a zinc level, it's called methylmannonic acid. It's what helps your body utilize vitamin B, and my B6 are critically low. They're like not even existent. So basically, it doesn't matter how much vitamin B12 I have floating in my bloodstream, my body can't use it. It's an autoimmune kind of response. So, and it causes neurological symptoms like migraines, seizures, memory loss. So I'm still suffering these physiological symptoms. And I don't know how long that's going to take, but anybody can tell you, if they didn't diagnose it, it would progressively get worse. You're damaging your brain cells by not getting to the root of the problem. So that's one way I feel I'm going to be such a blessing to people, is because I had the healthcare experience, and I'm vocal now, like, you need to find the answer. You will not dismiss me. I'm sick of being dismissed, and I'm sick of people saying you're just going to be okay, just because you don't fit a box of what certain patients do. Like a migraine patient, like they don't understand. And I'm so angry with this. And I know that I'm blessed, but there's so many victims that don't have medical knowledge or don't have nursing background or didn't have teaching background or don't even have the resources. Like, I think I'm so lucky that I had health insurance all these years. And I'm so lucky that the state did reimburse my medical bills, because otherwise you are not going to take care of yourself. And if you do not take care of yourself when you're a victim of trauma, narcissistic abuse, which is trauma, complex post-traumatic stress, you will progressively decline and you won't know why. So I'm a really hardcore advocate on have to listen to the person. You have to listen to the person. And actually somebody explained to me that the reimbursement is just not there for trauma victims or post-traumatic stress victims. So and the tests are very lengthy. Like I do have to have a memory test. So it would be covered if I had a drug addiction, it would be covered under DSM-4, but because trauma is not recognized, it's not. And I think that's such a shame, because narcissistic, like you were explaining the highs and lows, that's exactly how a narcissist creates an addiction between you and them, because you actually get a high. They obviously, most people that have been in these relationships know what the love bombing phase was. Like, they put you on a pedestal. And then when the lows are low, it's so low that your dopamine bottoms out. So you're not only mentally and cognitively being trained, your brain is becoming like a Neanderthal man that just had to stay away from the saber-toothed tiger. You're just constantly like, am I going to get eaten by this tiger? Am I going to get eaten by this, I should say lion. I should say consistent. But your brain actually changes, and the primitive part of your brain, the amygdala, which is just the part that keeps you alive in a fight or flight mode, actually gets bigger. And the part of your brain that is used to make good decisions and critically think shrinks. So we're not capable of making good decisions. So people can look at you like, I think I did have a few the police that helped me with my situation were awesome, but there were a few that kind of looked at, you could just feel it, like looked at you like, like you're a doctor and you're let this happen, and there's a little stigma there. But now I understand, like, it wasn't, I mean, I even had somebody say like, well, you have a double PhD, how stupid are you? And I was like, oh my God. And I really did like feel like, then you'd be depressed for days, like, oh, how stupid am I? I let this person do this. But your brain is not functioning the same. And people need to understand that the person is literally, if you look at the whole armor of God and what we're supposed to use to protect ourselves, you're taking the armor off a person and putting them in a battlefield without any weapons, any protection, just go on out there and fight this battle. And we absolutely need to support people physically, mentally, spiritually, because they are just not supported. And this is just proliferating. And if you think about it, I'm sure one narcissist abuses at least 3 to 5 people in their lifetime. So just think, like, for every one narcissist that's out there, there's 3 or 5 victims, where we're just one person. So this, just doing the math, I'm not a statistician, but I'm sure anybody could sit down and say, this is going to blow up if people don't do something about this. So I'm pretty passionate, pretty tough about that. Just advocating for people. And I understand there's time they won't be able to advocate for themselves. So I'm like there, I'm like been there. I'm like a protective mama bear now. And I do think, like, even like you were saying, for you were very young in college when it happened. Like, I don't think we have to wait for a victim to reach out to us. We need to start empowering young women. And there's a lot of men I've met that are victims of this. But statistically, it is more common in men. I think 75% of narcissistic abusers are men. But we need to empower these girls at a young age so that they don't fall into these relationships. It's funny because my girls, while I was writing my book, would just come home from school and be like, oh, mom, guess so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that. And like, she's a total narcissist. And I was like, awesome. Like, I'm so proud that my girls, like at 10 years old, could identify a narcissist. So, because you don't want, especially your children, but you don't want anybody to suffer the same way you did. So if you could prevent them from getting caught in the snare, that's the best. But obviously we're not going to be able to prevent everybody from falling into that snare. So we have to get them out. So what better person to get you out of a hole than the person that got themselves out? So
I think it's so interesting that just the physical aspect that you bring up, because I had no idea, like I didn't even think about that part of it. So just hearing you talk about this and how you use like the research and bridging science and the needs of people in real life scenarios together, I think is so impactful. And there's so many layers to dissect. And I can't wait to read your book. Can you share with our listeners where they can get your book?
They can get my book directly on Amazon. Just Google The Lion and the Narcissist. And I guess I come up because I'm in a #1 bestseller and I was in top 100 in every category. So, or they could also order it. They could contact me directly at thelionandthenarcissist.com or thelionandthenarcissist@gmail.com. So
awesome. And
I can't wait to get writing my new book. I'm so
that's exciting. Do you have any social channels too that they could find you on?
I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook.
Awesome.
And I'm learning to do everything else.
It's a process and it's always like, changing.
Yeah. So I was refined by the fire. Now it's like baptism by fire. You know, luckily I have twin 12-year-old girls, so they know tech, you know. That's so good. It's funny going to your kids and being like, help with this. So it's exciting. It's exciting. I just feel bad that there are so many people, but I think the exciting part for me is like, I just want to be like, hey, guess what? Like I was there and you're going to feel good. And you know, when you're in it, you never imagine that you were going to be healthy again. I remember the district attorney's office telling me like I was going to be just fine. And I thought it actually made me mad because I was like, how am I going to be fine? Like I felt like literally I was looking at myself in the mirror and that mirror had been shattered and they were handing me some crazy glue and like, you're going to be fine. Just put it together. And I thought, how? I'm never going to be able to put this back together. I'm physically injured. I'm mentally injured. I have no energy left in me. There's no way I don't even have a job. I was thinking, how do they expect me to put this together? But I really had to be a tough cookie, even though, and I think they probably were like, we don't want to hear from that woman again, because you can just imagine like most victims are broken and they've already been manipulated. So they don't even have the physical endurance to fight for themselves. So here they have this victim that's fighting back. You know, I think they didn't know what to do with me. I really think they had no idea, what are we going to do with her? She doesn't shut up. She doesn't shut up. And there was, there was that fear like, oh my God, they're going to think I'm a narcissist or I'm a crazy person. But in retrospect, like I'm so grateful, and it without a doubt was the right thing to do, to speak and to not give up, because that is allowing the narcissist to win. And I wasn't about going to let that happen. I wasn't going to let that happen. And I'm sure my narcissist views it as vindictive or whatever, but little does he know, like I could really care less. It was really about, if the woman before me had done anything, I would not have to do this much. Yeah. And I thought, well, at least now I've changed the script. I think a lot of people will be disappointed with the court outcome, but I will see. You'll have to give me your feedback on that. I wasn't, but I think the Lord prepared me for that. And it was awesome. I thought it was an awesome ending, but a year before I would have been nuts in the courtroom had I heard that outcome, but God did it all in his perfect timing. And I understood what the Lord was doing in that sentence. But now the script has changed because narcissists don't ever stop being narcissists. And I think as victims, we think when we see the next victim, what did she have that I didn't have? Or what is she doing right that I did wrong? Or why couldn't he be better when he was with me? He's not, she's not. Like, they are always going to be a narcissist. It's just the different phase that they're in and how compliant the victim is. When I was compliant, I was a princess.
Right.
It was when I asked, where were you? Why this? Why that I was punished for questioning him. So I'm sure I am like the most hated person now.
I don't want to cut you off, but we got to close up real quick. So sorry. I hope whoever's listening today definitely gets something from this conversation. And just thank you so much for joining me. And I think we're going to have a part 2. I can feel it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you,
you.
Danica.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.